Right now, I'm very happy to welcome our good friend, Greg Palast, back to the show. Greg is a filmmaker and journalist. He's author of several New York Times best-selling books, including The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Greg's film, Vigilantes Incorporated, America's New Vote Suppression Hitman, can be viewed on his website, gregpalast.com. That's an incredibly important documentary film to really understand voter suppression in our age here. And produced by Martin Sheehan and narrated by Rosario Dawson. Certainly something highly recommended for you to check out on Greg's page. Greg, thank you so much for making time to come on our program again this evening. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you again, Scott. By the way, it is a film. Grab your popcorn. It is entertaining, I hope. It's not horrifying.
Now, you have a way of, even in the worst of things that you're covering, make us smile a little bit. So that's your talent, right? So
yeah, well, what can I do? I mean, the corrosion and decay of our democracy does have its humorous side. So I don't want to miss that.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Makes the medicine go down. Anyway, Greg, you have covered the many tactics and strategies used primarily by Republicans in recent decades to win elections by suppressing the votes of Democrats, primarily targeting people of color, and by utilizing massive voter purges. Certainly that's big on the list. Onerous ID laws, gerrymandering. There's a lot to unpack there. Your latest investigation, titled Evil Scheme to Purge 500,000 Voters, describes a situation in the state of Georgia where Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is up for re-election in November 2026. I wondered if you tell us how Republicans in Georgia are attempting to defeat Ossoff through a massive voter purge, which is something that's not confined to Georgia, is it? It's a tactic.
No, not at all.
It's a tactic that has been widespread, and it will be widespread.
Yeah, okay. I mean, many of your listeners have probably seen the TV series The Purge, where once a year you go out and kill the people you don't like. Well, this is the electoral equivalent, where once a year, but it's usually in the off year. This is why I'm talking to you now in 2025, because in off years is when we do the big purge. That is, the GOP has become expert in many states, and Democrats have done this too, but you're right, it's mainly the GOP. I'm not being partisan. It's just that when you remove voters of color, guess what? You remove black people, you remove Asian Americans, et cetera. The color's blue. So that's their advantage. But so in the state of Georgia, where the U.S. Senate, the control of the U.S. Senate will be determined, Jon Ossoff, a very progressive Democrat, is wildly popular. He even has a high positive rating among Republicans. But their governor, Brian Kemp, who's termed out, is going to, no question, going to be running against him. How did the GOP win against a popular guy in a state which, by the way, has recently turned into what's called minority majority state? That is, most people in the state are not white. So how do the Republicans take over? Well, the way that Brian Kemp has won his last two elections, you get rid of the unwhite voters that you don't like on a mass basis. Now, how do they do that? The Secretary of State, generally that's the officer in each state that controls elections, and we're the only nation, so-called democratic nation with a democracy, where partisan election officials get to determine who gets to vote. I lived in Europe for years, and they'd be shocked to hear that you can actually just start removing people from the voter rolls. How many? Well, that's what I'm talking to you, buddy. They have targeted 480,000 voters. This is the Republican Secretary of State, targeted 480,000 voters for removal from the rolls. Now, why would you do that? Well, they're calling them inactive voters. Well, I mean, yeah, I probably spend too much time on the couch instead of doing sit-ups, so I can't say that I'm all that active, but I shouldn't lose my vote. What they mean is people who they claim, and their records are terrible, have missed a couple of elections or chose not to vote in the last couple of elections, whatever. By the way, as an American, you have a right not to vote as well as vote. But they're saying an inactive voter should be removed, even though federal law is very specific. You can't remove people for non-voting. What they're saying is, well, these people have probably moved. That's why they're not voting. Well, wait a minute. Why are we? So I actually went through the list. This is 500,000 voters. So we're talking roughly 1 in 12 voters. And may I remind you that Joe Biden won the presidency in 2020 because he won Georgia by 11,000 votes. So you remove 500,000, that's big, especially who are they? So I got the list. I had a sue in federal court, and I got the list of people they're removing the last time they pulled this stunt. And for the ACLU, I hired in the experts from Amazon and the United States Postal Service. We got special permits to do this. And we didn't take samples. We went through every single name of those who were purged. We found that 2 out of 3, 63.3%, for those of you who are statistically minded and taking notes, 2 out of 3 of those people on the list, hundreds of thousands, were perfectly legal voters living at their voter address. But what they did have in common, they were of most of them overwhelmingly were of an un-white persuasion. I was at the polling station when Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin showed up, voting in the same place for 50 years. They said, you can't vote here. And they removed her from the voter rolls. They removed, and then so they're going to go after 480,000 voters. This is how they're going to flip the Senate in Georgia. But that's not enough for them. They're also going after 87,000 voters, 87,027 voters to be exact, who've put in change of address forms. And they're saying, well, they've moved their legal address, so they can't vote. Well, guess why? Guess what people do because they put in change of address forms? They are known as students on vacation. And guess what color they are? Blue. They are going after black soldiers. If you watch my film Vigilantes, Inc., and again, yeah, by the way, it's out on YouTube now, so it's really easy to find. Just go to Vigilantes, Inc. by Greg Palast, and you'll meet Major Gamaliel Turner, who was assigned to California by the Pentagon, 70 years old. He's one of the top Pentagon experts on what's called warfare of the future. So he's assigned to California. So he put in change of address form. Here's where he sent my absentee ballot. They wouldn't give it to him because the Republican Party, not state officials, this is very important to understand. The Republican Party challenged people who put in change of address forms. They knocked out the voting rights of 4,000 soldiers, mostly black soldiers, out of Fort Benning, Georgia. You put in a change of address form, like Martin Luther King's cousin who had her granddaughter reading her mail, which down the street, whatever. There's a lot of reasons people put in change of address forms. That doesn't mean that they're illegal or fraudulent voters. And by the way, Scott, if you found a fraudulent voter, arrest them. It's a felony crime. Put them in prison. You rob a bank, Scott, you don't lose your bank account. You go to prison. So, but they're playing this game and say, oh, these people put in change of address. Well, what does that mean? It means that it's a student. And then plus they're going after people who are in non-residential addresses. Well, who could that be? Well, I looked it up. About 10,000 people are in Georgia jails waiting for trial. Just because you don't have money to pay bail. And who is that? Poor people. In other words, blue people, blue voters. You have 10,000 people in jails who haven't lost their right to vote because they're not convicted of anything. They're just sitting in a can. They're convicted of not having enough money to make bail. You have 10,000 people in nursing homes. Again, commercial address. And again, older people. Who are they going after? And it would have included me, too, because I lived in a building that was converted from commercial to apartments. So you have a lot of young urban people who are in converted apartments, and they will lose their vote. They know who they're going after. It's very sophisticated, very sharp. It's true that it's not picking up 100% Democratic blue voters, but they're playing the numbers, and they understand who's poor, who can't make bail, who's in a nursing home, who are students on vacation, who are the soldiers assigned to other military bases. And And they know when I've looked at these numbers, overwhelmingly voters of color. That's how they're going to take Georgia. But if it were just Georgia, that's serious enough. But as Gerald Griggs, who's the president of the NAACP of Georgia, says, Georgia's the test kitchen for these Jim Crow tactics. What they do in Georgia, they're taking nationwide.
Right. Let me reintroduce you. This is WPKN in Bridgeport. My name is Scott Harris. The program is Counterpoint, and we're speaking with Greg Palast this evening, filmmaker and journalist. We're talking about his recent article titled Evil Scheme to Purge 500,000 Voters, talking about Georgia. And as Greg just said, really the example or the test case for massive voter purges all across the country. Mm-hmm. Greg, I did want to ask you about one thing that may or may not relate to your investigation here, is that there were some articles last week where it was explained that the Trump administration and its allies have launched a multi-pronged effort to gather data on voters and inspect voting equipment, sparking concern among local and state election officials about federal interference ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Colorado was high on that list of targets, and many county clerks have been approached by the Department of Justice, by the Trump Justice Department, to get this information. I think the Secretary of State of Colorado stood in the way of that. But how does this relate to what we're talking about in Georgia, if at all?
Everything. Let me explain. Okay, so Trump issued an executive order. If you go to gregpalast.com, you can read about a Trump executive order that what he does is in the executive order, it said that the Doge administrator, that was a guy named Elon, he's not there anymore, but he's been replaced by someone even more vicious, this guy Dowd, who is the guy who wrote Project 2025 for the Heritage Foundation, who's also head of the Office of Management and Budget. He's taken over Doge. Doge will now have the right, under this executive order, to look at all the voter files of every state. Now, what is it they're trying to do? I'm not worried about the voting machines. That's all kind of distraction. That's kind of three-card Monty. They want you, look at the voting machines. Don't worry about the voting machines. What they want to do is they say they want to check to see if you're registered in two states. Is there a Scott Harris in Connecticut and a Scott Harris in Arizona? Well, obviously, that must be the same guy. Well, this is a system that we beat before. It's called Interstate Crosscheck. This is a revival of that program, which actually was key to Trump's victory in 2016. 1 million voters. I did this investigation for Rolling Stone. 1 million voters removed from the voter rolls because supposedly they were registered in two states. You know what you get? There are 800,000 people named Garcia in America. When you look for double voters and you find Jose Garcia in a number of states, they literally said that James Brown voted 238 times in Georgia, and they removed the James Browns of Georgia. That's the game that's being played. It's racial, and that's under the new executive order. And so it's a White House directed burglary of the voter rolls for nefarious purposes. So, yeah, it's really, really dangerous stuff. And obviously they go after swing states like Colorado, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I've been going to those states and working with the voting rights groups, and it is terrifying what's happening to the voter rolls. So don't worry about computers. Don't worry about Musk sending spiders from Starlink from outer space. Forget the space spiders. It's good old Jim Crow. It's just that Jim Crow is now in cyberspace, so they're looking for those black names, those Hispanic names, those Jewish names that are common, the Levies. That's the game that's being played, and they know who. And they know they know your ethnicity, they know who you're voting for. That's pretty much how life works.
Well, Greg, before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you the million-dollar question here. And you have the receipts here for what's going on, why it's going on, the goal here of winning an election they may not otherwise win if all these people are allowed to vote. Certainly that's what you're projecting here. What is an effective antidote? What can be done to challenge these efforts by the Republican Party to cheat their way to victory in 2026?
Or even
which I would just say by
Democrats
2026, by all accounts, could be pivotal in whether our democracy survives or not.
Well, so start participating in democracy. The number one thing, and it may sound simple and stupid, please check your registration. I know whether you're in Connecticut or every state in America allows you to go online and check your registration. Actually, there's one site, vote.org. You say, I've been voting the same years. Oh, yeah? Well, Martin Luther King's cousin voted at the same station for 50 years, and they threw her out. I looked up my own registration. I was flushed out in California for God knows what reason. Re-register. And by the way, re-register online. Do not register on any yellow pieces of paper. Check your registration 60 days before an election. Always, and all your friends and neighbors, go to vote.org, check your registration, and make sure you have not been purged. And this is the year of the big purge, so by the end of this year, check again and register, then register again, then register again. You can beat the purge. You can beat these vigilante challenges by registering, getting people. You know what? I got to tell you, Scott, 5 million people were marching around in the streets, No King's Day. Unfortunately, I didn't see one place where they were registering voters. You want to make a difference? Guess what? March to the polls.
Yeah.
March to the polls. You don't want a king? Then voting is the core of democracy. And I know it's corny. I know it seems like little, but you join those voter drives. You make sure that people are registered. Do it online. That's number one. And then scream and holler. Hey, listen, my film Vigilantes Inc., thanks to Leonardo DiCaprio and Jamie Foxx, is available free now on YouTube. Spread it around where you can see how the GOP, and it is basically the GOP. It's not all the GOP. I'm not going to be partisan, but it's mainly been the GOP, which is challenging voters. This is a brand new thing where you don't have to be a government official to challenge a vote, and they're challenging people by the hundreds of thousands. We got to expose this. Stop it. If you want to fight, you don't want to have a king, well, it's your ballot versus the monarchy. That's where it is.
Well, Greg, before we run out of time, I did want to ask you what you're doing with this information you have in terms of contacting voters to do what you just say is the obvious solution here. These, 500,000 voters, 1 million voters in Georgia who are about to be purged.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge job, contacting them all and say, hey, look, you're on the hit list. You better get in gear to re-register.
Well, guess what? The only reason why Biden won in 2020 is because Black Voters Matter, NAACP, my colleague Jesse Jackson, and others reached out. Actually, cards went out to every single purge voters. The Southwest Voting Rights Organization, a Hispanic group, made 150,000 phone calls into Georgia saying, you've been purged, re-register right now. We had billboards with my narrator of my film, the wonderful Rosario Dawson, billboards over Atlanta. A federal judge said, even though we got resistance from the state, he noted that we got most of the people back on the rolls ourselves. We're not. So we are litigating. I'm working with the NAACP. I work as an expert witness in federal court cases because I'm an expert in this area as a statistician. And so we work hard, but hey, man, help us out. Join us. Join Black Voters Matter Fund, Rainbow Push, join NAACP, and certainly please go to gregpalast.com, sign up, get the free notices, the free investigative reports. By the way, I'm now columnist weekly for Raw Story, but you can get it at gregpalast.com. And spread the stuff out. We got to get people activated And it's not going to happen by wringing our hands. We got to get in motion. And I think we can, Scott. We've done it before. If you look at my site, like about Jim Crow cost Kamala Harris about 3.5 million votes out of about 170 million. And what that means is, that sounds like a lot. It is, but they can't steal all the votes all the time. That's how Biden won in 2020. It's not that I'm for Biden. I just feel like the voters, not vigilantes, should make the choice of who our senators and presidents should be.
Absolutely. Greg, thank you for all you do. I know we'll stay in touch on this and the other issues you're working on and investigating, but I would certainly recommend our listeners go to your website, gregpalast.com, see the Vigilantes Inc. film, and check out these latest articles, including what we've been talking about tonight, an article titled Evil Scheme to Purge 500,000 Voters. That's the issue we talked about pertaining to Georgia, but certainly something that could apply with the Republican Party tactics to any state. Greg, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks again for making time for us tonight.
You're very welcome, Scott. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Greg Palast.